Chennis is going into his first year as a South Carolina State head coach, and he has a lot of similarities to a fellow MEAC coach. So let's point out those parallels. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off, it doesn't mean the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And listen, I understand that sports might not be sporting the way that you want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a bonus every single day. So that's every single person, every single day, all summer long. Get yourself a bonus by visiting FanDuel.com. So we'll wrap up today's episode by looking at the HBCU Swingman Classic and continuing our trend of covering this every single day this week. Prior to that, Shakir O'Neal is going to FAMU, and I think that this is going to provide him with more opportunities to see the court. But before any of that, Chennis, former Benedict College head coach, now current South Carolina State head coach. He's going into his first year with the Bulldogs, and I think that he has a lot of similarities to a fellow MEAC coach, and that is Damon Wilson. I actually think that Damon Wilson is the best comparison for Chennis. HBCU Game Day, thank you for this, because they wrote an article, and it was very detailed. They had way more examples than I'm going to give. I'm going to give one. But HBCU Game Day wrote an article detailing the history of Division II HBCUs, Division II HBCU coaches who moved up to the FCS rank. I didn't want to read too much of it because I know that naturally I'm going to absorb it, and I didn't want to regurgitate some of that stuff on accident and think it was my own thoughts or anything like that, right? But I got it saved. I got it up on my tab so that I can go back after this. But when I read that article, or I read the tagline of that article, the first person that came to my mind was Damon Wilson. Because of everybody who has done it, Damon Wilson has done it the most recently until you get to Chennis. So if we're looking at comparing history of how guys have done, some people have come in, and I guess I'm kind of lying. I did read the beginning of it, but I didn't read the whole thing. I thought, no, this is too good. I got to do this on my show before I absorb all of this. Y'all, I'm a sponge. I ain't afraid to say it. I am a sponge. I have been accused of copying people. I ain't copying nobody. But then I realized, I just was reading this and it just naturally absorbed, and this is just how it came out. So I didn't want to do that because I rock with them over there. But anyway, that being said, they detailed a bunch of people. I just want to focus on Damon Wilson, because Damon Wilson, just like Chennis, came up from the D2 ranks, and he was quite dominant before he left. Let's look at these two, because I think that the similarities make this interesting, and we haven't yet seen the entirety of Chennis journey. Their journeys are so drastically different, but they have one thing in common, and that's success right before making the leap. And not just, you guys were good. Y'all were solid coaches. Y'all had competitive teams. They were dominant. Benedict College was dominant in the last 2 years of Chennis 3-year reign. When you look at Damon Wilson, the last 3 years, Bowie State won the CIAA championship every single year. It was interrupted 1 year by COVID, so they didn't have a game. But in the 3 years that they did play, so technically 3 out of the 4 calendar years, in the last 3 seasons, Bowie State won the CIAA when Damon Wilson was there before he left for Morgan. So with that being said, that's the number one similarity, is what they were able to do in college. Wilson is more tenured. He has a longer coaching career, and Wilson has actually coached on the FCS level now. I can see what his transition was like. So let's look at Wilson's transition as we prepare for Barry's transition, because there's some difference in situations that you're stepping into, but the idea of moving up a subdivision is the exact same. So when you look at Wilson, when he first got to Morgan State, he was taking over a team that was 2-7, boosted them to 4-7, then to 4-6, right? And in that, you look at the out of conference games. See, that's the thing. I look at the out of conference games for them. And yes, you were able to knock off, I think it was Richmond that they knocked off. But then they got super close to another top 25 team. And when you just watch how they competed, you saw something different. And you know, these are things you only get to see if you watch them. They were so close, but the offense was so bad. The defense was so good that they kept them in games. But overall, I felt like I saw a difference in between year one and year two of the Damon Wilson Morgan State Bears. That's how I felt, right? So if I'm using that as a similarity, of course, understand Barry's not stepping into a 2-7 situation. He's not stepping into that. He's stepping into a team that was 5-6, I believe. Like that's a completely different scenario. So he shouldn't have to go salvage everything in the same way that Wilson is. And you're coming off of having Buddy Pugh, who's a pillar. And I'm sure that Pugh will continue to be a part of making sure this ramp up period goes as fast as possible. I think the support system for Barry is going to be greater. I also think that the MEAC is weaker, because when Wilson entered, that was the same year that North Carolina Central won the championship. That was the same year that you're coming off of. And we had an opinion about, it's funny because we had a certain opinion about who South Carolina State was going to be heading into that year. They ended up not being that at all, but we had a certain opinion about it. North Carolina Central had Davius Richard. You're looking at this, even this year, all the quarterbacks, like, where are they at? Where are they at? You're looking at replacing Davius Richard. And I like how they're talking about Walker Harris. And I honestly, I'm buying. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid on how they talking about Walker Harris. That's the thing. The MEAC is wide open because the quarterback play is such a question mark. I'm buying everything they're selling about Walker Harris. However, I haven't given my money to them. I'm just ready to buy it. I haven't, the purchase hasn't gone through because I still have to see it, because I'm not seeing it in practice. But I'm buying everything they're saying. I liked how I seen them against Mississippi Valley State. That is Mississippi Valley State, though. But like, I'm buying these things. Howard, quarterback open. I think their running game is going to be strong. Like, if you have a quarterback, and I know Chennis Berry believes he has his quarterback in Eric Phoenix, you might be able to make some noise. I think that the MEAC is wide open. So not only do I feel like you're entering a better situation as far as your team, I feel like you're entering a better situation as far as your conference. Now, they were already better than Morgan State, so I think the room for growth is a little bit different. But if you can take those minor steps, hey, you're 2-7, now you're 4-7, now you're 4-6. If I can go from 5-6 and I can have another 5-6 season for a coach who is coming into his first year, I think that's the thing. When I look at Damon Wilson, I look at him as taking over a team that was on the floor, on the ground. When I look at Chennis Berry, he's taking over a team that already has some legs. So if he can come in and have a close to 500 season, it's different. Because, or excuse me, if he comes in and has a close to 500 season, it may be viewed different, but I still have to treat him as a first year FCS head coach. I hope that's clear on what I'm trying to say. Basically, Damon Wilson's improvements are easy to see because he took on a bad team. But just because Chennis Berry is taking on a better team does not mean that he should instantly be a conference title contender. He may still have those first year head coaching bumps. So I have to judge him like a first year head coach. But as we push forward, Shakir O'Neal, he's now a FAMU Rattler. First off, I think that this fit makes a lot of sense for his status, and I think it makes a lot of sense for his opportunity. And we'll break down both of those things as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Don't forget, things are different now. It's just FanDuel.com. Forget all of the slashes and everything. It is just FanDuel.com. And this summer, FanDuel wants to hook up everybody. I know We usually focus on those who are new, but we want to say thank you for your continued support of FanDuel. So go ahead and go to FanDuel.com. It doesn't matter who you are, how long you've been there, or what you enjoy to put your money down on. FanDuel is having a daily boost every single day, y'all. Daily boost for any and everybody all summer long. So go ahead and get in on some of this. Maybe you want to get on some WNBA action. Maybe you want to get on some MLB action. The All-Star game, the Home Run Derby is coming up in a minute. So once you get to the Derby, now you're looking at something that's like, put some money down on that. You can go futures with the NFL, futures with the NBA. The Olympics are on the way. You can put money down, but there's only one place for you to do it, and that is FanDuel.com. Go ahead and go to FanDuel.com. Make every moment more. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day for your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today. The whole thing, Locked On Sports Today. It's the first of its kind, live 24/7, all day, every day sports network on YouTube. So go ahead and check that out and see what they're talking about. Whether before I come on, well, no, make me your first listen. But whether right after I come on or a couple of minutes after, a couple of hours after, it doesn't matter. Now, let's look at Shakir O'Neal, who is moving within the SWAC. And I think that if Shakir O'Neal, we know, all right, judging by the name, let's get the elephant out the room. Yes, this is Shaq's son. It's not Jermaine's son. I guess it could have been. But this is Shaq's son. So Shaquille O'Neal's son, Shakir. If he was going to stay in the world of HBCUs, I believe that FAMU was the place for him. If Shakir O'Neal was going to continue, because I'm sure he was a 3-star prospect coming out, I'm sure he could have went to a smaller group of 5 school, a mid-major. I'm sure he could have if he wanted to. But if you want to stay in the world of HBCUs, and I don't mean this as in elevate to that, I just mean he could have went elsewhere. I think that FAMU was one of 3 to 5 schools that I just think makes sense for him in general. One of the schools is Texas Southern. He just left them, right? The other school is Southern University. And the reason I say 3 to 5 is because I'm just thinking of a big name school, like one of the ones that has name recognition, one of the ones whose national brand is at a peak at the moment. And FAMU is one of them. So I think that FAMU is one of the schools that I could see him at. Because if we're just going off of cachet, the O'Neal last name is going to bring buzz. And I don't think FAMU goes looking for buzz. I think that FAMU is very prepared for the buzz. I think that it's a very fitting place for you to want to go get the buzz. Good weather out there, Florida. Hope everybody okay. I don't know what's going on I know it's hurricane season, tropical storm season. Hope y'all good out there in Florida. Know my people in Houston. I'm gonna check them out. No, they all right. But beautiful weather in Florida most time out of the year. FAMU just feels like a place for stars. It feels like a place that stars gravitate towards. So when you get Shakir on there, the last name just kind of makes sense. Okay. That's what I'm saying there. And then from a personal relationship standpoint, I could have seen him going to Southern, be in the same places your dad went to school at. But at the same time, that's probably a little bit too much pressure. You already got the last name attached to you. And no pun intended, the Shaq shadow is something that's probably very difficult to escape. So going to that same city might not been I remember when your daddy was, he might not wanted to do that. But and then Texas Southern, the relationship with Johnny Jones and his dad, I think it made it easy to form a connection. So it's not shocking that he went to TSU. When I saw that, I was like, okay, makes sense, because I know the LSU ties. So it made sense to me. But now that he's left TSU and he's went to FAMU, what does he get out of the move outside of being in a place that is for stars, right? Because I mentioned that first, but in no way is that the most important thing. When I look at what Shakir O'Neal is going to get by becoming a Rattler, I see him as a player who's finally going to receive a better opportunity. I think he received an opportunity, but you got to understand, TSU has been really good over the last 3 years, and that's how long he's been out of high school. Shakir redshirted his freshman year. Then he went into a freshman, sophomore year, and he didn't see the court much. But TSU been really good. When you don't see the court on a good team, it's way different than not seeing the court on a bad team, right? Like if you was Valley, dang, this is my second shot at Valley. Can I get a third shot at Valley? I might try to get a shot in at Valley in the last part. Why? Just because when I was in school and we was trash, I always knew we could beat Valley. And then that one year we didn't. And we went I won't say undefeated. We went we went winless. There we go. That was a sad year. When we ain't beat Valley, I knew it was over. I said, "Oh dang, man, this is about to get ugly." But yeah, anyway, the point is that Shakir O'Neal, don't hate me, Valley. Don't take shots at me. I'll make it up to you. Um, the point is that Shakir O'Neal did not play much at Texas Southern. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that TSU is very talented. FAMU is going over a roster overhaul. I remember when Patrick Crary, it was a little bit of controversy about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, when talking about his roster management, how he got rid of everybody. But it turns out that that's not what happened. But the one common thread, and I just kind of let that be for a second. I need to let that breathe. I felt like I got a little too deep when Grambling Volleyball did this. I was like, let me just wait for a second because there's too many conflicting stories. Let me wait for a second. The one thing that is constant is that FAMU don't have no players. See, whether you want to take this side of the FAMU news or you want to take that side of the FAMU news, and it quieted down, so I don't hear too much about it anymore. FAMU basketball doesn't have anybody on the roster for real. So what that means is if I step in, I have opportunity. I'm not going into some ready-made system. I'm going into a place where everybody is changing. There's so much overhaul when it comes to FAMU on the basketball department. And if I'm a guy who averaged 7.3 minutes as a redshirt freshman, averaged 9.7 minutes as a redshirt sophomore, if I'm coming from that, I'm looking for somewhere I can go play. I'm looking for somewhere I can go compete. And what better situation? Like, think about it. Shakir O'Neal, let's just read it out. Shakir O'Neal averaged 7.3 minutes as a freshman. He averaged 9.7 minutes as a sophomore. The idea that you can get into a rhythm in that time frame, it doesn't happen often. There's so many players who need to be able to get into a rhythm, and that's just not enough time. This isn't to say he gets 36 minutes and all of a sudden he's the SWAC player of the year. But what this is to say is, I don't know if we've really seen the extent of O'Neal's ability because he hasn't had the time to get comfortable, get into rhythm. He barely takes shots. He averages a shot and a half a game over his 2 seasons at TSU. You're looking at a guy who averaged 1.6 points per game in his career, but he's barely taking any shots. He's barely taking any shots. So I don't know if I can hold so much against him. Maybe I cap off his ceiling a little bit. Maybe I'll do that. But I don't know how much I can hold against him because, doggone it, I ain't see that much of him. I don't know what he really is. I don't know these things. So because of that, I have to be a little bit hesitant. Because of that, I have to say when he gets to FAMU, he will get the opportunity to see the court in a way that he hasn't if he plays up to par. No one's guaranteed a spot. I don't care if there's 4 people on the roster right now. They will fill out that roster. And at some point, there will be somebody for him to compete against. But at least he doesn't have to compete against guys who already have the favor of the coaches. At least he gets to compete with guys who got there at the same time as him. So I think by going to FAMU, let's put all the name stuff aside because that's not what's important in the grand scheme of things as far as what happens on that court. I just believe that FAMU picking up Shakir O'Neal was a good move for the young player because it finally gives him the opportunity to see the court in a way that he struggled to do at Texas Southern. And that's okay because TSU was a really good team. I understand why it could have been difficult, but now it's the put up or shut up moment. Now it's the time to see. If you can't get on the court at FAMU, throw my hands up for you. Now, as you push forward, we're going to look at the HBCU Swingman Classic because we're continuing our coverage of the event. It's going down on Friday. So if you're in the DFW, Arlington area, I want you to make sure that you're out there and let me know that you're there. I'll come out there and I'll pop out, say what's up, show love, y'all know where to find me at South Exclusives. Y'all see it down there. So if you're on the audio, starts with an S, ends with an S. But yeah, holla at me. We'll be out there. But right now, we're going to continue with our coverage on Locked On HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. As we get up out of here, I want to go over some numbers for you to know at the HBCU Swingman Classic. On Friday's episode, we're going to double it up. We're going to go with players you need to know, and then we're going to give an isolated segment to Cam Buford. At the worst, we're going to do players to know and Buford to be a part of that. But I believe that I'm going to do Buford as his own individual player. I think I'm going to go with the individual player as of right now. But I got 2 days to think about it. Do whatever I want to do. But let's go on with some numbers. Number one number that you need to know, 50. That's how many players are in this event. You have 50 of HBCU's best players in this event. I think it's very unique because you don't have to be draft eligible in order to be a part of this event. And I think that's arguably my favorite part is that you can go get the sophomore. This is just an HBCU baseball celebration. It's something that we don't see. We do not see that in other sports. You don't see the guys having this postseason game away from a postseason all-star game, right? Let's just say it. You don't see postseason all-star games in football, in basketball, unless they're draft related. This ain't draft related. This is purely a celebration. Will the draft be around this time? Yeah, I gotta see let's see when the MLB draft is though. But it's gonna be around this time, but it's not directly correlated to the MLB draft. So because of that, you can go get the sophomore. You can go get the freshman if he's that good, right? So I love it personally. The MLB draft is on because my phone wants to be slow at the wrong times. It's on July 14th. So is that Sunday? I don't know. Maybe a guy like Buford can make a little bit of noise and he can get through and get drafted somewhere. Anyway, that's the 50. What you have to understand about this 50 is that it's majority SWAC players, and not because the SWAC is the best conference, which I mean, it is the best conference, but not because of that this time. It's because the MEAC don't play baseball. They have some schools within the MEAC that play baseball, but they play outside of that. And we have 7. That's the second number you need to know. 7 is the amount of MEAC players who are making up the 50. You have Evan Bolden from Delaware State, Jamal Ritter from Norfolk, Justin Jurnett from Norfolk. You have Kieran Etwaru from Delaware State, Manny Jackson from Norfolk, and Sam Nieves from Coppin State. Now, what you see here that I think is kind of a fun fact, and this isn't a number, so I'll just say both. Both of the Delaware State players, both Bolden and Etwaru, are pitchers. So you see what they do well. They put pitchers out there, and they go ahead and brought some pitchers out here to the HBCU Swingman Classic. The numbers that you'll see on Friday's episode is I'll have some of the best hitters. I have some of the best pitchers. I'll break down that's probably the top 3 to 5 because I think you have 12 pitchers. So that's enough for me to go into 5. I'll break down the best 3 to 5 pitchers and batters. Be interesting. I'm really kind of workshopping this right now. If I did 3 from each or 2 from each, I don't know. We'll figure it out. Got to have an even number. So probably 2 of each. That being said, 3, that's the next number that you need to know because 3 players in this game performed in the MLB Combine. Kenya Brown from North Carolina A&T, Cameron Buford from Grambling State, and Kyle Walker from Grambling State. I will break down Buford, Walker, Brown. I'm sure all 3 of those men will be spoken about on my Friday breakdown, where I feel like I'll do 2 segments. It'll be a much more comprehensive breakdown of the event that we'll be watching tonight. So, or that night, I should say. Next number, 6. Bama State and Jackson State each have 6 players in this game. Those are the schools with the most representation within this. And you got to shout out to Delaware or to Alabama State. You got to shout out to Jackson State. These are 2 schools who are really good this year. These are 2 schools that were highly rated. You see Grambling, they're up there too. I think Grambling has 5 players. That's the next highest amount. You got to give shout out to these schools, man, because you see teams like Jackson State, and you look at a Joseph Eichelberger, who early in the season we were talking about was one of the best hitters in the nation, not just for Jackson State, not just within the SWAC, but in the nation. You look at a guy, you look at the guys from Alabama State, and you know what they were able to do. You know the consistency that they've had. You know how good they are. And then you look at Grambling, they were able to make it to the NCAA tournament in baseball. So you're looking at these numbers. North Carolina A&T, they don't get the shine because they're already independent, but then they're not playing in the SWAC and they're independent school. It's like a double on double. But North Carolina A&T had 4 players who were able to make it. I want to give them a shout out by name though. No, I don't, because I don't have it written down. We're all over the place today, but we're almost done. Let's wrap it up with our last number, which is 11. That's the last number. We're going to go to 11. And I want to read off these I do have written down. I want to read off all of the players who are performing in this game for the second time. Like I told you, you don't have to be draft eligible to play. So some of these people played in last year's game. Some of these people are the first ever, right? These 11 people are the first ever two-time HBCU Swingman Classic participants. And let's go with Edwin De La Cruz, Jamal George, Manny Jackson, Irvin Escobar, Kyle Walker, Randy Flores, CJ Castillo, Cameron Buford, Ali Lapreed, Kyle Radcliffe, and Luis Rodriguez. Now, the majority of those guys are on McClendon's team on the national squad. Griffey ain't get a lot. He got De La Cruz, George, Jackson, and Walker. So he got 4 of them, but he ain't get a lot of those guys. But yeah, so that's the numbers you need to know. 11, 6, 3, 7, and 50. All about the roster. On Monday or on Friday, excuse me, we'll really break down the game. And I'll be excited. I'll do the best pitchers, the best batting, best hitters. I'll go through the best. I can't wait till I see this pitcher line up against this batter. I'll go through all of that on Friday's episode. So I'm very excited for that. And I can't wait to get it to you. So let me go ahead and close out today's show so I can get that to you. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.